Have you ever lay in bed late at night, scrolling through an endless feed of faces on a modern dating app, or watching the seemingly perfect daily routines of hundreds of followers on social media, only to feel an overwhelming, hollow sense of isolation? We currently live in a technological era where connecting with another human being requires absolutely nothing more than a simple swipe or the effortless tap of a glass screen. We are constantly surrounded by the digital presence of others, interacting around the clock through brief text messages and highly curated photographs. Yet, despite this constant electronic stimulation, an invisible but profound epidemic of deep loneliness continues to quietly consume modern society. We frequently wonder why, despite having far more avenues for instant communication than any previous generation in human history, we still feel so entirely disconnected and deeply misunderstood by the people immediately around us. We have subconsciously begun to treat our personal relationships almost exactly like cold business transactions, silently keeping a careful mental ledger of who texted first, who invests more emotional effort, and what concrete benefits we stand to gain in return for our precious time. And when a personal relationship inevitably becomes slightly difficult or demands extended patience, we quickly discard the individual, fully convinced that a better, flawless partner is just one more convenient swipe away on our screens. We now approach the concept of human love with the exact same mindset of an aggressive consumer walking into a retail supermarket, desperately searching for a polished product that perfectly matches our strict list of personal demands, while supposedly offering the absolute best market value. But what if this exact consumer-driven mindset is the very toxic of our modern emotional despair? What if our chronic generational loneliness is not actually caused by a tragic lack of the right people in our environment, but by our fundamental, tragic misunderstanding of genuine human connection actually requires? Tonight, we will deeply explore a groundbreaking psychological perspective that aggressively challenges everything modern consumer culture explicitly taught us about romance and friendship. We will look clearly beyond the Hollywood fairy tales and the temporary, shallow dopamine hits of digital validation. If you have ever felt completely exhausted by the fleeting, disposable nature of modern relationships, I invite you to sit back and breathe deeply. This quiet intellectual exploration might completely reshape how you view yourself and your future connections with the world. Truly understand the profound depth of human isolation, we must turn our focused attention to Erich Fromm, a brilliant German Jewish psychoanalyst and intellectual philosopher, closely associated with the influential Frankfurt School. In the early 1930s, as the dark, violent shadow of the Nazi regime rapidly enveloped Europe and terrifying human cruelty was placed on public display, Fromm was forced to flee his homeland and desperately seek refuge in the United States. Throughout his turbulent life, he witnessed firsthand the absolute extremes of human behavior, observing how deeply political and economic societal structures could severely warp individual psychology. After keenly observing the rapid industrialization and booming consumer culture of post-war America, Fromm published his most famous intellectual masterpiece in 1956, titled The Art of Loving. Unlike the superficial self-help books that aggressively crowd modern bookstore shelves today, this volume was not a cheap collection of quick romantic tips for easily finding a fairy tale soulmate. It was a rigorous, philosophical diagnosis of a modern society that was rapidly losing its human soul to the cold, calculating mechanics of capitalism. When Erich Fromm keenly observed that modern capitalism does not merely dictate how we buy our physical groceries or sell our physical labor, it actively infiltrates our deepest internal psychological frameworks. In a strict capitalist society, value is strictly determined by market exchange. You give something of value only to receive something of equal or greater value in return. Fromm argued that we have tragically applied this exact same calculating economic logic to our intimate human relationships. We subconsciously view ourselves as commercial commodities placed on a competitive shelf, desperately trying to improve our personal market value by acquiring better jobs, fitter bodies, and more impressive social statuses, all in the desperate hope of attracting a high-value partner. When we finally enter into a romantic relationship, we treat it exactly like a mutually beneficial business contract. If the emotional return on our investment suddenly drops, we declare relational bankruptcy and simply walk away without hesitation. Fromm powerfully asserts that this transactional approach fundamentally destroys the very essence of what genuine love actually is. He warns us that as long as we view love as a passive commodity to be acquired, rather than an active skill to be internally cultivated, we will remain perpetually lonely, drifting endlessly from one empty transaction to the next. The central thesis of Fromm's philosophy rests on a single, radically transformative realization. We have profoundly misunderstood the very foundational definition of love. The overwhelming majority of people believe that love is simply a stroke of accidental luck, a magical emotional sensation that you helplessly fall into when you finally stumble across the perfect, flawless object of affection. We invest massive amounts of mental energy trying to make ourselves highly desirable, obsessing over our physical appearance and social charm, all while waiting entirely passively for love to miraculously happen to us. However, Fromm vehemently argues that love is not a passive sensation or a lucky accident. Love, he boldly declares, is an active, demanding art form. Just like learning to master the complex violin, painting a detailed portrait, or building a sturdy house, love requires dedicated study, intense effort, and relentless daily discipline. You cannot simply sit in an empty room, buy an expensive violin, and expect to produce beautiful, moving music without ever practicing the difficult, painful chords. Yet, this is exactly what we arrogantly do with human connection. We lazily expect it to flourish without ever investing the grueling internal work. If love is an active art, what are the specific techniques required to effectively practice it? Fromm outlines 4 indispensable elements that must be present in any genuine manifestation of love: care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. Care is the active, physical concern for the life and continuous growth of that which we love. If a mother claims to deeply love her child but lazily neglects to feed him, her poetic words are entirely meaningless. Responsibility is not an externally imposed, burdensome duty, but a completely voluntary, eager response to the unspoken physical, psychic needs of another human being. Respect deeply requires seeing a person exactly as they are, without the selfish, destructive desire to violently mold them into a convenient shape that serves our own personal agenda. Finally, knowledge entails penetrating far beyond the superficial surface of a person to truly understand their deepest, hidden struggles and fears. Most modern romantic relationships entirely lack these 4 active pillars. We do not actually love the other individual person. We only love the pleasant, validating feelings they temporarily provide us. True love, Fromm insists, is not a feeling of passive receiving, but the courageous, active power of constant, deliberate giving. It is the ability to stand firmly in your own internal center and offer your vitality to another, without aggressively demanding a receipt in return. How, then, do we practically apply Fromm's penetrating, philosophical wisdom to our deeply distracted daily lives? Very first, and perhaps the most difficult, action plan is the strict daily practice of rigorous personal discipline. In our modern culture of endless, rapid instant gratification, discipline has almost become a dirty, outdated word. We are deeply conditioned to seek out paths of minimal resistance, quickly abandoning difficult books after reading a single page, and completely discarding relationships the moment the initial biological infatuation inevitably wears off. Fromm fiercely reminds us that no meaningful, lasting art can ever be mastered without a rigorous, repetitive, consistent routine. You must actively dedicate time every single day to practice the art of loving, completely uncoupled from your fleeting, momentary mood. Start incredibly small, deliberate action. When your partner, a close friend, or a family member begins speaking to you, force yourself to physically put down your smartphone. Stare directly into their eyes and practice the difficult, quiet art of active listening. Do not use that mental space to formulate your clever defense or to plan your next brilliant response. Simply absorb their entire, complex reality in that passing moment. And the second crucial involves violently confronting our own deeply hidden narcissism. We all harbor a secret, selfish desire for the universe to revolve entirely around our personal narrative. This destructive, silent narcissism actively convinces us that our own pain is uniquely heavy and important, while the tragic struggles of others are merely trivial inconveniences. To truly love, you must deliberately step completely outside your own rigid psychological borders and attempt to genuinely experience the world from the exact vantage point of the other person. You must ruthlessly cultivate an intense, nearly unbearable objectivity about your own flaws, fears, and motivations. A sharp conflict inevitably arises in your relationship. Instead of immediately listing the numerous ways you have been deeply wronged by their actions, pause and coldly ask yourself, how did my own insecurity actively contribute to the creation of this specific emotional friction? Love deeply, the absolute destruction of the demanding ego. Finally, we must proactively learn to give without secretly attaching strings. Next time you perform a kind favor for someone, monitor your internal thoughts extremely carefully. Are you secretly expecting a return favor, a shower of validation, or a rapid boost to your own sagging self-esteem? If so, you are not practicing love. You are merely conducting a stealthy, toxic, psychological business transaction. True giving is an expression of sheer internal abundance, an absolute joy found exclusively in the pure act of offering itself, regardless of the ultimate, unpredictable outcome. The Art of Loving is absolutely not an easy, comfortable book to read, nor does it offer a soothing, validating message for the modern, fragile ego. Erich Fromm stripped incredibly away the romantic, false illusions that have been force-fed to us by decades of cheap movies and manipulative marketing campaigns. He bluntly forced humanity to look deeply into the mirror and recognize that our chronic, painful loneliness is largely a tragic symptom of our own emotional laziness and our stubborn refusal to do the exceptionally difficult internal work. Love is certainly not a magical lottery ticket that you win by pure, dumb chance. It is a muscular, demanding psychological capacity that you must actively build through sweat, tears, and relentless daily effort. Your current, painful isolation is not a permanent, unchangeable sentence from an indifferent, cold universe. It is simply an urgent, flashing warning signal that you have been passively waiting to be loved by someone, rather than courageously stepping forward to actively love others. The exact moment you permanently stop anxiously searching the distant horizon for the perfect partner and begin the grueling work of becoming a person truly capable of loving, your entire human experience of deep connection will radically transform forever. By and tonight, just before you quietly drift into sleep, take a long moment to honestly reflect on the relationships in your own daily life. Are you aggressively operating like a calculating consumer in a spiritual supermarket? Or are you operating like a dedicated, disciplined artist facing a terrifying blank canvas? True, unconditional love is undeniably the most difficult, terrifying task any human being can ever undertake in their brief lifetime. It actively demands ultimate vulnerability, terrifying patience, and the complete, willing surrender of your defensive ego. But it is also the absolute, only genuinely effective antidote to the crushing, empty isolation of the modern human condition. To love completely and without fear is the ultimate act of silent rebellion against a cold, capitalist society that desperately wants you to remain insecure, disconnected, and endlessly hungry for more consumer products. Thank you so much for joining me on another intellectual philosophical exploration at BookDream. I sincerely hope this quiet journey has offered you a moment of profound peace, clarity, and reflection. If this message resonated deeply with your own silent struggles, please remember to subscribe and share your personal thoughts in the comments below. We will eagerly return next week with another powerful, timeless book capable of completely transforming your daily life. Have a restful, peaceful night, and may you confidently find the courage to practice the difficult art starting tomorrow morning.